So you've done all your research and you finally made up your mind about buying a home in Delaware. But now you're wondering, how exactly do I do that? And is there anything I definitely need to know about the process? Well, in this video, I'm gonna go over the process of how exactly to buy a home in Delaware and provide some tips that my clients have found helpful along the way. And I can guarantee after watching, you'll know exactly how to buy a home in Delaware and what to expect. My name is Windom, and I help people buy and sell homes here in Delaware. And on my channel, I talk about exactly what it's like living here in Delaware. So if you're thinking about making a move here to Delaware or potentially selling, I'd love to have a conversation to see if it made sense for us to work together. So I'll leave my info on screen and in the description below. Feel free to reach out, or if not, that's okay too. The first thing I recommend my clients do is get up, go find a mirror, and look yourself right in the eyes and ask yourself this question: why? Why do I want to buy? Does it make sense for me to buy? What's my plan for buying? And really have a heart-to-heart conversation with yourself. Now, I know this all sounds a bit weird, but a lot of my clients have said this really helps them because when they have that one-on-one conversation with themselves, they come to the realization that it just doesn't make sense for them to buy a house right now sometimes. And if you do come to that realization, it's okay, but you definitely want to know before you start the process. Buying a home ain't easy. Sometimes it's pretty difficult, but if you have that conversation with yourself and you know with 100% certainty that this is the right thing and that you want to do this, when those hard times do arise, you'll be able to manage them and get through it and get that new dream home. So after you have that conversation with yourself, the next thing I usually recommend to do is to review your financial health and your well-being. And that's gonna consist of, the pretty basic things. You're gonna wanna check your credit score. You're gonna wanna review your savings. You might wanna look at your budget to see exactly what's coming in and what's going out so you can make an informed decision. Just to give you some perspective, because I get this question a lot. When it comes to credit score, most lenders are usually gonna look for a median score of around 640. Now, don't panic if you don't have a 640. They can still do the loan with lower scores, but there may just be additional requirements that are needed. And each case is a little bit different. And as far as savings go, a good rule of thumb is that you're going to want to save about 5% of whatever purchase price you're looking into. And now you may be thinking, Brandon, 5%? That's pretty steep. I don't know if I got that. And I'll actually go over how I came to that number a little bit later in the video. But again, don't panic if you don't have that saved up. You may not need all of it, but think of that money kind of like airbags in a car. You rather have them and not need them than need them and not have them. Trust me. The next thing you're gonna wanna do after that is actually find a realtor. But you're watching this video, so you probably already got that covered, right? So we don't even need to dive into that. We can just go ahead and move on. Just kidding. I'm not the right realtor for everyone. I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and that's okay. But when looking for a realtor, you definitely need to find someone that you can effectively communicate with, that you trust, and generally overall, you're gonna wanna kinda like them because this is a big decision. And this will be probably one of the biggest purchases you'll ever make in your life. So trust me when I say, when you're talking to your realtor, you're definitely gonna be talking about a multitude of things, and you're gonna be talking to them a lot, a whole lot. So after you find your realtor, the next thing you're gonna wanna do is find a lender and get a pre-approval. So either one of these steps are interchangeable. You can find a realtor first, or you can find a lender first, and usually they'll have someone they'll recommend and vice versa. So again, just like when you're looking for a realtor, you're gonna wanna apply those same principles kinda to your lender as well, because you're gonna want someone who can effectively communicate and teach you about the process, because you definitely want to know what's going on, especially when it comes to the money. You gotta secure that bag. So while you're going through that process of getting pre-approved, they're gonna be going through your financials with a fine-tooth comb. And they're gonna ask you for a lot. They're gonna ask for a tax return, bank statements, pay stubs, W-2s. They're gonna check your credit score. They're gonna wanna know about any savings or additional accounts, 401ks. They just wanna know all the numbers, all the fun stuff. Just a quick recommendation here. I'm not saying that you should, but one thing that my clients have found helpful is that they use a local lender here in Delaware instead of a bigger institution. And the reason for that is because typically local lenders are going to have a very specific understanding of the processes in Delaware, and as well as any type of unique programs that are just specific to Delaware, like maybe grants or assistant programs. So now that you have your pre-approval and you have a realtor and you know exactly what you can afford or what you want to afford, comes everyone's favorite part, and that's it's time to go shopping. Now this process is pretty straightforward. This is where all the research you've done about Delaware is gonna come into play. Or maybe you didn't do any research. Well, if you didn't, I got you covered. You can look at some of the other videos I have here on the channel discussing Delaware. But basically in a nutshell, you're gonna go out and tour homes and try to find that perfect one that fits your family's needs as well as your budget. Once you find the one, that perfect home that checks all the boxes, the next thing to do is to start on all the paperwork, and that's submit an offer. Now, when it comes to the offer, I'm gonna try my best not to bore you to death. So I'm just gonna go over some of the main points, the cliff notes, if you will, of what exactly you need to know when submitting an offer. And let's just be honest, nobody really likes paperwork anyway. So some of the most important things in the offer are, number one, the price, obviously. Number two, the earnest money, which is basically just a deposit to show the seller that you're serious about buying this home, that you got some skin in the game. Next are the inclusions and the exclusions, such as, does the washer and dryer stay? Do you get to keep those cool curtains? Are they leaving you the hot tub? Also, the settlement date. When exactly are you gonna close? Is it gonna be in 30 days, 45 days? Where is it gonna be at? Inspections and contingencies. Do you want a home inspection? More than likely the answer is yes, you do. And then any additional terms. Now, there's some more little nuances and other little things that go into an offer, but that's mostly the meat and potatoes because, let's be honest, you didn't click on this video for me to go over the Delaware agreement of sale, did you? So once you submit that offer and it does get accepted by the seller, we're gonna move into the next phase of the process, which is gonna be your inspection period. And this is gonna be when you open up the hood and look at the engine, so to speak. You're gonna have a licensed home inspector come through the property and check it out. They're gonna look for any type of major issues or any issues at all, so you can come to know what to expect and what you're getting yourself into when you're buying this house. So I have to mention this just to manage expectations. A home inspection is a visual assessment. While they test functional operation in certain systems, they can only diagnose or let you know about what is currently happening with the property at that particular time. And what I mean by this is that they don't have x-ray vision. They can't look through walls and see a slow leak if there's no evidence of it happening at that time, or break down a door that they have no access to. They also can't tell the future. So if when they tested the HVAC or the water heater, if it performed up to the specifications or the parameters that a regularly functioning unit would, there's no way for them to predict that 1, 2 months, 3 months, or even 6 months down the line that the unit is going to fail. But what they will tell you is the age of the unit or whatever they're testing and what the average lifespan is. So a great way to think about this is if you take your car to a mechanic, you're there for a tune-up, and then the mechanic says, hey, you know, these tires usually only have a lifespan of about 50,000 miles and you're at 60,000 miles. Obviously the tires are still working at the time of the tune-up, but if you were to leave and then catch a flat 2 days later, you wouldn't blame the mechanic for that. But back to the home inspection. After the home inspector does finish, they're going to compile all the results into a report and give it to you. And then you can either take that report and ask the seller to remedy fixes, or you can say, well, you know what, looks good, I'm ready to move on. So after the inspections are all done, next usually will come the appraisal. Now, an appraisal is an unbiased estimate of a property's fair market value as determined by a trained and licensed professional. Now, this is very important as a buyer because it's actually a safeguard that's there to protect you as well as the bank. Now, what that appraisal is going to do is ensure that the property is worth what you were willing to pay for it, because you wouldn't want to overpay for a property that's not worth what you were willing to pay for it. And I can tell you right now, the bank is definitely not going to give you the money for an asset that's not worth what you're paying for it. So as long as the appraisal comes back with a value that either meets or exceeds the offer price, then you're good to go. If for some reason it doesn't, then there's a little bit of different course of action. So after you get through underwriting and the loan is approved, the next thing you would do is actually schedule a time for closing. And this is one of the ways that Delaware differs from other states, as we're an attorney closed state, meaning that we don't use title companies. So licensed attorneys actually handle the closing processes such as deed preparation, title search, and they'll also go over most of the paperwork that you're going to sign there at closing, as well as answer any questions or break down costs. Speaking of closing costs, remember when I said in the video how I came to that 5%? Well, there's two main expenses that come along with closing costs here in Delaware. And number one is going to be your down payment. Obviously, everyone knows about that. Depending on your loan, it can be as little as 0% or it can be as high as 20% and everything in between. But the sneaky one here is in Delaware, we have a transfer tax of 4%, and it's usually split 50-50 between the buyer and the seller. So you're looking at 2%. And unfortunately, it's one of the highest ones in the nation. Now, while that can be offset by seller credits or seller concessions, trying to find a seller willing to do that in this market sometimes may not be as easy. But back to the closing process, after you sign all your paperwork, there's nothing left to do but to get your keys and enjoy your house. Now, there are a lot of little intricacies or nuances that come along with the actual home buying process, but this was a very good overview. So now that you know how to buy your home here in Delaware, and maybe you still need to do some of that research I talked about earlier in the video, I actually made another video discussing Delaware right here.